Okay, Madam Mayor, we are ready to go.
Great, thank you. So I'll go ahead and call the City Council work session reviewing the annual priorities with our boards and commissions to order. We'll start off with the Planning and Zoning Commission, and I just want to confirm for the public listening now that we do have a quorum from P&Z. We also have a council quorum, and I'll kick it off and let that commission lead, and maybe that chair or maybe their admin support wants to just let us know who's on. I don't know if she can even tell, and then also start with your priorities. Hello, Chair Eklund.
Thank you, Mayor Terry. I only see 3 commissioners on, so I would like our admin staff to let me know who else is there. Oh, I see Gary now and Nathaniel. So we have 5. Great. Thanks, guys.
You're welcome.
I think that a updated priorities list was sent out to council on Friday. It was a little different than the first one you got. We had a work session, well, actually it was at one of our regular meetings that we went over this, and I have one change that I'm going to talk about, but we'll go down through the short and medium-term goals. And we continually review and update Title 15, and there's certain sections this year that we want to look at. The current planning and zoning that include the subdivisions of land, replat, and conditional use permits. We want to review those. We've had quite a few conditional use permits in the last year and replat, and I'm happy to say some subdivisions as well. The Fort Raymond property planning and platting, we have had some work sessions regarding that, and I believe information has been forwarded back to the council regarding our discussion on that. But we will continue, as we discussed at our work session, that we would like to see a plat that shows the easements and any utilities that are within that property and possible road placement. We would also, in short and medium terms, review and update the municipal land inventory and management plan. The last time that was updated was in 2014, and it was mentioned quite a bit in our discussion for the Fort Raymond property because there had been a recommendation in that 2014 plan. We would also promote public interest in understanding of the comprehensive plan and the review process. It's constantly a constant need to keep the comprehensive plan in front of the public so that when we do have to come up with a new one, we have input and people know where to go and who to speak to regarding their input. Lastly on there is to work with historic preservation to develop methods to preserve the historic downtown. We've had a work session with them, and we have dedicated our time to meet quarterly with historic preservation in the upcoming year. And then under our continuing goals, review and update all of Title 15, look at current and future community needs to identify a wide range of strategies and investments that support the neighborhood growth and vitality, which some of that was at our last meeting regarding the plan to help with subdivisions and city utilities. And then provide research, analysis, and insights to in an accessible and straightforward way on current topics, including demographics, housing, lodging, economic development, resiliency, and sustainability. Promote public interest, understanding, and ground truthing for the upcoming review process. And I'm just going to go ahead and make the statement on this one. I pulled my notes from our meeting that we had when we discussed this, and I thought that we had placed ground truthing under short-term goals. It's been discussed over the past year, maybe year and a half, that we really, in order to do zoning requests, zoning change requests, help with the vacation rental issues, which weren't a big issue with COVID, but will come back at us. We really wanted to see what is on the ground in the city limits, where most of the residential is located, and in institutional, as that changed, expanded, multi-family, residential, and all of those, so that we can get a better understanding when requests come forward. So I don't know about the rest of the commission, but I'll finish going through this list and then ask them if they remember that the same way I did. We also would like to continue compliance with the zoning code, especially health and safety issues, and this is always ongoing. And I think we've done fairly well with that. Of course, it is a strong need for administration to follow up on any information we get from our constituents regarding these issues, to have letters go out since we don't have a code compliance officer. We would also like to identify and implement land use and zoning changes, as well as other actions needed to support short-term recovery and long-term vitality of the city. We are working with PACCAB. We have a work session coming up on the 18th to go over the Seward Marine Industrial Center zoning overlay of some of the development plan. We will continue to work on that as items come up. We work quarterly with the Seward Bear Creek Flood Board, and our recent discussions with them, or longer, I guess, the beach revitalization of down on the waterfront along the Green Belt. And the last one was on hazard mitigation and work on the flooding out at Japanese Creek onto the Dick Rath Road and what we could do with that. And then we have our Did You Know education that I'm hoping the community is reading and learning, and Planning and Zoning Commissioner training, and Commissioner Verhey just attended the whole week of, almost a week of training, and is so knowledgeable now. So I'm going to go ahead and ask the commission if they wanted to add anything or wanted to speak on that ground truthing item. And if you raise your hand, visually I can see Tom and Vanessa. Other than that, I'll have to ask Mrs. Wild to call on Nathaniel and Gary if they want to speak. Tom, go ahead.
Yes, you're absolutely correct. And that ground truthing is so important to so many of the other things we've been working on, especially concerning the long-term planning and stuff like that. So you're absolutely correct on that.
Any other commission comments? I'm sure we'll get some questions from the council and need to respond to those. So if I don't have any commission comments, I'm going to turn it back to Mayor Carey. Okay, I don't see any commissioners with their hands raised, so go ahead, Mayor Carey and council, and
Yeah, with that, I'll open it up.
questions?
I'll open it up first to council if there's any questions, or do you want to start? Go
Yeah, I have a question about the beach revitalization. What is that?
Well, I might let Tom brief everyone on that, since he's been kind of the proponent on our commission with our support, of course. Go ahead, Tom.
So the beach revitalization has a lot to do with the flood board management having material that needs to move out of different locations. And we're trying to set up some kind of a program where that material could then be deposited along the beach area and start where we're over the last 50 years, the soil along the beach has washed away, leaving basically a very rocky beach. And working with the Army Corps of Engineers and other organizations, it's possible that material could be relocated to that location, and the natural process of erosion would then move that soil back down the beach, and basically revitalize we're never going to have a sandy beach, but it's certainly more sandy beach. And also start building up the dunes along the edge of the beach, which would be, east of the walkway. That's basically that plan.
Thank you.
So I guess I'll just jump off of that. Is that the main project you're working on with the flood board? I know sometimes I beat the drum a little bit that I'd like to see more of the sale of the property tax money being spent inside city limits on projects. So is that, I know there's Jap Creek out there, but is that the main project you're working with them on?
I would, no, I think that's more of a side project. That's actually a project which would help them in other projects, because it gives them a place. I mean, they need to move soil material out of, fill areas where the rivers are. And, so yeah, that's more of a side project. I mean, Jap Creek, it's really a matter that, they have a list of projects that are priorities for the area, and anything that works in with the, within the city area, I mean, they're keeping abreast of us, with us abreast of them, and we work with them as far as priorities.
Okay.
So,
Madam Mayor, can I also
So
answer?
one of the items that we discussed in the last work session with them was we don't have updated flood information since 2009. I think the LIDAR are from anything that was prior to 2009. And we've had a few events since then, so that was one of the things that we wanted were some new maps for the Seward, city of Seward. And I think that would be one of the issues that came up during the Fort Raymond property discussions. And the revitalization of the beachfront, some of the areas that we thought would help would be the clearing the load that comes down through the tunnel, which is the gravel that used to come down onto the beach prior to the tunnel. It used to wash down Jefferson and be part of the beachfront. And so if we could help move some of that, and I think we're waiting for Army Corps of Engineer permission to put that in the tideland. It is the same soil, so we were hoping they would say yes.
Yeah, I'm just interested if that's the only thing called out with the priorities, how that makes everything else look, but maybe that's just me. Madam Mayor, just so.
You mean what we work with the flood service area board?
Yeah, I mean, I guess
one item?
the Resurrection River, Jap Creek, like those airport impacts seem like more important projects that we would want to make sure P&Z is tracking with them. But so all I see is one thing listed, and it's that beach project, which I'm sure is a very valid project. But when you look to say, okay, here are our priorities that council wants to see, like Jap Creek's not on there, Resurrection River's not on there, and those I feel like impact our infrastructure and homes. Like, I'm not downgrading the beach project, I'm just saying when you put something on a list, then it seems like the priority.
So
Well,
our joint work
We could
session.
go ahead and add Japanese Creek and the flooding of our portion of Dick Raft Road. We did discuss that at the last work session, and we have discussed it at many prior work sessions whenever there's a flood event.
Yeah.
So, we can go ahead and add that. I guess what I have heard or thought was happening was that PACCAB was the one that was pushing the envelope on the airport property, but I haven't really had any discussion, or the council or the commission had any discussion with the flood board on the airport property. Just over the last 10 years or so we've discussed it, but not recently. So we could add that and then also broach that when we have our work session with PACCAB. And I think we are having biannual work sessions with PACCAB.
Yeah, and I guess I just was mentioning it because I think you're the body meeting with the flood board. I don't know that PATCAB meets with the flood board on any regular basis.
So if I can just help answer some of those.
Yeah.
You know, I think that the Planning and Zoning Commission is, you know, at heart, they do work with multiple organizations as well as have these continuing joint work sessions. So instead of listing it out, one thing that I want the council to know that the commission does work on the Jap Creek study. They're involved in the Second Avenue culvert replacement.
Yeah.
They're just things that I attend the meetings, someone from community development attends those flood board meetings, and then we report back, and if it comes down to involving planning and zoning, then we do that. But there's a lot of different conversations that happen during those joint work sessions, and I think that every one is different. Like this one was talking about the Jap Creek feasibility, and then as Miss Eklund said, taking some of that overburden and putting it onto the beach revitalization so they tie in. I agree we could add all of those projects because they do discuss them. It's just that we didn't put them in the priority
Or
list.
do we
But
just take this one out and provide
and just do the
flexibility?
continuing joint work sessions. Yeah.
I mean, I don't know, if you list one specific thing, then to me, that's the priority to
Right.
work with the flood board, and I don't know that that's the priority. Maybe I'm wrong.
And on your comment of working with the, trying to work with the money spent evenly or within Seward, the flood board, of course, is trying that also, but it is something that's always brought up by community development that, like as far as even the LiDAR is important for all of us. And at the last meeting, they spoke about the fact of, the cost involved in that, and that maybe from this Japanese feasibility, we can also get some of the newer LiDAR.
Yeah, because I know their office is also moving outside of city limits.
Yes.
So I'm glad that your board meets with them. So
I would like to add those two other projects to the list so that they're before us, and as we meet with them, we can make sure that we ask what their involvement is with the airport issues, and then that we always discuss the Japanese Creek flooding so rather than remove beach revitalization, I'd like to add those other two items.
Is that Second Avenue project still a possibility? That's also a really good one that would be a huge benefit to the community. And I don't know if the public knows about that, but that's, how there's, just kind of that ditch along Second Avenue? Like there's some plans out there to increase the culverts, really make that salmon spawning habitat that would just be a benefit to those homes and the city as it comes into the lagoon, and I just didn't know where that was right now.
It was even brought up at the last meeting that we had with administration and the flood board. I see it as still one of those plans that are on sort of the top of the list that we bring back every time we discuss it. Figuring out the funding, and then of course with 2020, what happened in 2020, I think a lot of these things sort of got pushed back, but it has been included and we've discussed it at a couple work sessions. It's been brought in, but I would like to see that, it is something that benefits everyone, and even when we were doing the rezoning on Second Avenue, it was brought up.
Yeah. Were there any other comments? Go ahead.
I guess I would just say I did attend both, I think 2 or 3 of the work sessions that had to do with the beach revitalization. And I do have some concerns. One was the cost of the project, because there was cost associated with moving the material to the beach. The other concern that I had was that the project, to not get in the way of the EPA, was to put the gravel or the material in piles that were not where the tides would hit the gravel. They were where, you know, beyond that super tidal line. There was some information that was given out, and some caution I feel that was given by the flood board about, you know, I think there was one statement on there that said like either revitalized beaches erode quicker at 30 to 40% more than non-revitalized beaches. So my concern was, are we pouring money down the drain to do that project? So I do have a concern with that being on the priority and for the project, and I may be wrong, but I don't remember what the specific numbers were for moving the gravel. And I think it was somewhere around $50,000 or computing how much each time the dump would be to move the gravel. But those are just my concerns and things that I've talked to other constituents about, of what the project cost would be and what the benefits to the project would be as well. Because if I do remember correctly, if the gravel were to be put onto the beach like it was, if the water were to flow back through, then the gravel would end up in the water. The gravel at this point, be without the EPA study or the EPA approvals, would be above the super tide line in piles. And I just had concerns about, you know, I guess they were saying, well, you know, people climb on the piles or they wash away with the rain or with the snow, and then they eventually get pushed into the beach. But for a certain amount of time, you have these piles of gravel on the beach. So I was attending those meetings and I did see that. I was a little bit concerned about how the project would work out, about the cost of the project, and what it would actually look like until the gravel actually went to the beach. I don't agree that it should be on the priorities, but that is just my opinion.
Councilmember Osenga, were you raising your hand? Go ahead. Good, Tommy, you can go ahead.
Hey, just to clarify that, I think a lot of things were discussed about as far as what cost would, and I think it was like $100 for a truckload of soil. And to clarify that, there's some different permits that are needed, and at different levels. And at the level of where you deposit material above the high tide line, no permits are necessary. So that's something that could just be done, and the discussion was to do that a little bit just to see what happens, put soil out at the end of summer or at the end of fall as we go into our winter period and heavy weather period, and see what happens with that. But that was really only a step that was going to be done before we got any permitting. But the idea of having some permits, if you get the permit, and I just want to clarify this, we have the permit to put soil into the tide line. We don't have to put the soil there, or the material there, let's call it that. We don't have to put the material there, but we can. So then when we get into a situation, say where we have heavy flooding and we have deposit problems over by the outflow tunnel, then, and soil needs to be moved away from there in a hurry, there's a place that it can be put very quickly and easily and probably cheaper. And then the same thing with the flood board. If they have to move material out of Stony Creek and they have money to move the material, but then they have to have a place to put it. And that's a big concern there. It becomes a problem sometimes. They want to move material, but they don't have a place to put it. Same thing with like Japanese Creek. So this would give a place to put it, but I don't think anybody has ever really expected to see a major expensive project done. And that's just a clarification for you guys. It's just a project to make sure if we can get it in place, then options become available for a lot of different things to happen. Does that clarify things a little bit?
Yes.
And I guess that's how I see it.
Moving on, are there any other comments or questions about the list? I'll jump out there again. So I think it's a great list. It's a lot of work. Like, you guys have a lot of homework. So I will say, and I'm just one council member, and I'm sure I'll get lots of emails, but like 4 meetings with historic preservation a year seems a little heavy when I think we're moving into a period where we need to be very flexible and adaptable to businesses and responding to conditional use permits and just really supporting, you know, the economic engine and people's development. So I just want to make sure that, in my opinion, the focus should be on the things like property planning and platting and updating the muni lands plan and, you know, subdivision of, subdivisions and, you know, your ground truthing. So some of the HP stuff, while valid, extremely valid, I don't know that, I guess I just want us to be mindful of your workload, and that would be one of the things that I think for the next couple years might get lost with the balance.
Madam Mayor, can I clarify, just so everyone knows, these joint work sessions are normally only an hour. We're really used to having a joint work session with the flood board, and it's normally just 6 to 7. So I know this has come up multiple times. I just want to make sure everyone is aware that we're not meeting for hours 4 times a year. So just that 1 hour, yes, it's still a lot, but I just want everyone to know that it's 1 hour.
But so what I know is that meetings are like an iceberg.
Yes.
So like it might be an hour, but then like all the support work is exponentially underneath the water. Like council meetings are, 3 hours, but then I'm sure administration has, 40 to 80 hours of work coming out of it. So I guess that's my point. Like I understand the meeting part, but then the staffing, if there's a lot of work coming out of that, like there's other focuses that I'd like to see. But I'm just one person, so if other folks want to chime in, Councilmember DeMoss?
I would echo what Mayor Terry is saying, in that I just think that you guys have a lot of work on your plate, and I personally would like to see focus on helping businesses get back and support in that area over looking at, making more rules with historic preservation on businesses. Although I think it's a fun idea and could be explored in certain different ways, I definitely think that I would like the focus on the other topics, at least for now.
Mayor Terry?
Yeah, go ahead, Chair Eklund.
Yes, I think that somewhere in the past year, there's been some confusion. Planning and zoning prior to 1994 had the responsibility of historic preservation. And then there was a resolution passed that made a separate historic preservation board to handle that work. Historic preservation is a very active group right now, and they came to community development and to P&Z and asked for help in how they would go about doing some code changing and things like that. And of course we want to help them and we admire their enthusiasm, but I think that in some cases the work they're asking us to do should be more administrative work than planning and zoning, coordinating with historic preservation. So I agree. I think some of our goals should take priority, and yes, work sessions are, even though they're an hour long, they are sometimes very heavy topics, and I'd like to spend my time working through those with the community. So I'd be happy to continue to work with HP, but at the same level that we work with PACCAB, just biannually.
Because there's other things I see on here, like the working with PACCAB on the Seward Marine Industrial Center new zoning overlay and development plan. I mean, we just, have that new breakwater. There's a resurgent in the marine trade. I mean, we really need to diversify as a community. So that working with PACCAB on, and with the harbor master, you know, that's a priority for me, making sure that that industry is supported, so, yeah, that's great. But I'll open it up to council if there's dissenting opinions or wanna hear more about that, go ahead.
From what I've understood from Historic Pres, what they're looking for is the historic overlay. So maybe what, you know, just having that on, working with Historic Pres with the historic overlay, since PACCAB has a specific, you know, agenda item that they're working with, maybe instead of the 4 meetings. I'm just, because I think it's really great that everyone's working together, and I don't want to make historic isn't important, because it is. But on the other hand, maybe a little bit more like Chairwoman Eklund was pointing out, like it just kind of grows into this big, like, it grows bigger and bigger. So maybe just confining that goal into something smaller.
And maybe moving it to the continuing
Right.
instead of the short term.
Yeah, I mean, it's just a suggestion,
It's a good suggestion.
which I have a segue
Go ahead,
question.
go
I don't
ahead.
want to get off this topic.
No, I think we're ready, go ahead.
Okay.
We're going through things quickly, go ahead, Councilman
Okay.
Catherine.
So the next question that I had, I understand that right now P and Z has a normal meeting, the second Tuesday, and then the fourth Tuesday is a work session, is that correct?
Third Tuesday.
Okay,
Mhm.
so it's the first and third?
Mhm.
I know as a business person or a person trying to get business done, to have to wait a month till the next meeting, and then if you guys don't have a quorum, then you might have to wait 2 months to get business done. Is there any way that there can be 2 meetings a month?
There's been a lot of times that if something comes up that is an emergency, like a lot of our things require us to have at least a 3-week layout because of the way that we have to notify or do public notice. But there's been many times in the past that we have done a special meeting on the same night as our work session night. So we've incorporated that many times.
So I thought that was historically, so if something comes in that doesn't quite make the one meeting, you can turn that work session into a special meeting.
If it's something that's so time sensitive that we need to, that's what we've done in the past. But we really try to stick with that, like there's that 3 weeks that, you know, to like a replat or rezone, those type of things, the public notice alone, just to get the letters out in time and do those things.
Are there any other comments or questions? Great, no, I know you guys have a lot on your plate and you've been doing a lot of hard work. Does administration have any questions or follow-up? I'll just look to council, is there anything specific that we need to, I think what's gonna happen is this will come back to us as a resolution. So we have time to think about it and clarify anything that might need to be clarified.
Yeah, Madam Chair, the draft will go in front of the Planning and Zoning Commission at our next meeting, and then we'll bring that forward, the approved forward to you. So they have the ability to make changes then too.
Okay.
And then I just
So,
want to,
can I just clarify, this is Chair Eklund, could I clarify then that the ground truthing, duty, responsibility is gonna be moved to, short and medium-term goals, and that we were going to expand, the work with the flood board to, mention the projects within cities that we wanna work with.
You know what, I'm sorry, I at least was referring to the old one, I didn't realize the laydown for the 8th. Yeah, I mean, that sounds correct to me, if that, is that what we've resolved, does that match everyone's understanding tonight? And then, I did have one more thing, so, you know, I mentioned this at the last meeting, where the boards and commissions almost, you know, it didn't happen with P and Z, but the other two, they approved their priorities. Then it comes before us for approval, and then we have these meetings. I guess in my mind, what would make sense is, and it's actually different than this, but what I was thinking was the boards and commissions discuss in a meeting and approve their priorities. We have this work session to discuss and understand what the recommendations are. And then it comes to council for final approval and we can make amendments at that time. Does that seem logical? There's a couple ways we could do this. We could have the joint work session first, but then there's lots of moving parts and pieces. But does that make sense to everyone? Does that make sense to Michelle?
I'm in agreement with a shorter timeline for it. As long as, I mean, this is a work session, so what's before you now is not set in stone. So if it can be amended with those changes that we just discussed and go to you and then go directly to you and then council makes more amendments as they see fit. And if, you know, the commissioners can always attend a council meeting and give comments.
Oh, and so what I was talking about is future years, but definitely this should come back to you guys and then to us. It just got off center, I
Okay.
think, with the, yeah.
And then, there has been discussion that you guys might wanna change the timeline, like ours are always April to April, but my understanding is that council and other commissions are possibly looking at bringing it so it's a January through December. So is that something that you want us to look at or incorporate for our next year?
It would be nice to just have everyone on the same cycle. Maybe meeting in January. I mean, it doesn't make sense for them to meet in December, then you have the holidays. Maybe if boards and commissions can make their recommendations in January, we meet in February and then adopt in March. Does that timeline sound right?
And then just one more thing I want to clarify.
Thank you.
The working with PACAB and Seward Marine Industrial Center overlay, that work session is not the 18th, it's on the 16th. So I just want to make sure that date's out there.
Oh, did I say the 18th? I'm
No,
sorry.
no, you didn't.
Oh, okay. Okay, 16th. Oh, good. And is that a noontime meeting?
No,
Okay.
it's an evening
Evening
meeting,
meeting.
6 p.m.
Well, planning and zoning, you guys are my favorites.
You say that to all the boards.
No. Well, with that, should I adjourn this piece, or we'll just say thank you, everyone? We'll keep the work session going, or do you want me to adjourn? What would be easiest?
No, I'd like to just recess if we
Okay.
can
Okay.
have it be one long
Great.
meeting.
Well, we'll recess for 5 minutes, and council can grab something to eat. Thank you, P&Z.
Thank you,
Thank you,
council.
council.
Bye.